Welcome to Impact Signals, social impact at the scale of AI. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Sarah.
Sunday, March 29th, episode 44, weekend edition. Satellite insurance that pays out automatically, $1 billion in disaster grants restored by court order, a Mexican supercomputer named after an Aztec goddess, and digital health passports for displaced populations. We start with a story that combines two things we don't often see together: satellite technology and disaster recovery finance. Lagos State, Nigeria announced it has gone live with a parametric flood insurance policy covering up to 4 million vulnerable residents, with automatic payouts of up to $7.5 million.
The mechanism is what makes this significant. ICEYE, the Finnish radar satellite company, continuously monitors water levels across 7 designated zones in Lagos. When flood depths cross 50 centimeters, a payout is automatically initiated. No teams need to inspect damage. No claims need to be filed. No bureaucratic process needs to unfold while flood victims are waiting for help.
The partners behind this include AXA Climate, AXA Mansard Nigeria, Swiss Re as reinsurer, and JBA Risk Management as flood modeler. The InsuResilience Solutions Fund, backed by UNDP, the Insurance Development Forum, and Germany's BMZ, financed 90% of the first year's premiums. The stakes are clear. Lagos faces an estimated $40 billion in cumulative climate losses by 2050. In just the first 10 months of last year, 3,000 people were displaced by flooding in a city where insurance penetration sits below 0.5%.
If you followed our episode from earlier this week, Lagos also deployed AI-powered real-time water monitoring across its 187-kilometer coastline. That's the detection layer. This is the finance layer, the recovery mechanism triggered by that detection. Together, they form the architecture of a complete climate resilience stack. The Nigerian federal government is already evaluating scaling this model to other states. For climate-vulnerable cities in the global south where formal insurance markets simply don't exist, Lagos is now the blueprint.
From Africa to the United States, FEMA announced this week it will reopen the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, BRIC, making $1 billion available for disaster mitigation projects covering fires, floods, earthquakes, and hurricanes.
The catch: this was not a policy decision. A coalition of 22 states sued after FEMA unilaterally canceled the program last April, freezing roughly $3.6 billion in previously approved projects. U.S. District Judge Richard Stearns ordered FEMA to restore funding after the agency failed to comply voluntarily.
The funding breaks down as follows: $757 million in a national competition, $112 million in state and territorial allocations, $50 million specifically set aside for tribal nations, and $81 million for building code adoption. Applications closed July 23rd. A 2024 study found every dollar invested in disaster preparation saves $13 in economic impact, making this restoration highly consequential ahead of Atlantic hurricane season.
That tribal set-aside is worth noting. The same structural gap the UT Austin AI2 project is working to close, the fact that only about 7% of Native nations participate in federal flood management programs, could be addressed in part by this funding. BRIC grants could support adoption of culturally grounded AI flood mitigation tools.
To Latin America, on March 25th, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum committed 6 billion pesos, approximately $340 million, to a supercomputer called Coatlicue, named after an Aztec goddess. The machine's specifications: 314,000 trillion operations per second. That's roughly 100 times more powerful than Mexico's current most capable system, and 7 times more powerful than Pegaso, Brazil's largest supercomputer.
The primary purpose is extreme weather forecasting and climate disaster prediction. Officials plan to use it for weather prediction, energy planning, and disaster early warning systems, enabling forecasters to issue alerts earlier and with higher precision than current computational capacity allows.
What this means regionally: as extreme weather intensifies across Central America and the Caribbean, national supercomputing capacity for meteorological modeling is essentially infrastructure for disaster risk reduction. Mexico building computational leadership in climate science creates the possibility of shared early warning resources for Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Belize, countries with far less computational capacity facing similar climate exposure.
Organizations running disaster programs in Central America should track Coatlicue's deployment timeline. The improved forecast resolution will affect regional pre-positioning capacity across the humanitarian system. A deployment timeline and named technology partner have not yet been confirmed.
And a governance milestone that matters for displaced populations specifically. WHO announced on March 26th that the International Organization for Migration, IOM, has joined the Global Digital Health Certification Network as its first international organization member.
The GDHCN was originally built during COVID-19 for travel health verification. It's now evolving into something more significant: portable health infrastructure for displaced and mobile populations, secure, interoperable proof of vaccination histories and medical records that works across borders without compromising data sovereignty.
IOM's specific mandate within the network is to extend this into displacement settings and crisis contexts with limited connectivity. Dr. Elaine LeBric, WHO's Director of Data, Digital Health, Analytics, and AI, described the system as providing neutral, privacy-preserving technical norms for the most vulnerable populations.
The practical stakes? When a refugee crosses a border, their vaccination history doesn't cross with them. Chronic conditions go undocumented. Medications get double prescribed. Each of these creates preventable harm. As UNHCR's Digital Gateway continues its 2026 rollout and WFP's Brave biometric system expands across Africa, the architecture of an interoperable humanitarian digital health infrastructure is taking shape. Organizations running health programs in displacement settings should begin alignment with GDHCN standards now.
A note on the disaster wire this morning. OCHA confirmed that the prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz is causing what it calls the most significant global humanitarian supply chain disruptions since COVID-19. Tanker traffic has dropped by more than 90%, according to FAO, blocking fertilizer shipments at a critical moment in the global planting season. The UN Secretary General this week appointed a special envoy for mediation and established a dedicated Strait of Hormuz task force. Jan Egeland of the Norwegian Refugee Council: "If this war continues, we risk a far wider humanitarian disaster." Lebanon has recorded more than 1,100 killed since the Israeli offensive resumed.
Events. RightsCon 2026 is in its final day in Nairobi. The IAPA Global Privacy Summit opens in Washington this Tuesday through Thursday. The AI and Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Response Symposium, AI plus Hydra 2026, is April 7th through 9th in Burlingame, California. Action on Disaster Relief follows April 8th through 10th in Washington.
That's Impact Signals for Sunday, March 29th. If this briefing is useful, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out at impactsignals.ai and share it with someone working in the field.
Stay ready.